Hey everyone, Mr. MC here. This is a guide for round 3 of the 2021 FIA Manufacturer Season Stage 2 taking place at Red Bull Ring with the Group 3 cars. So let's get this started by mentioning that for the time trial, qualifying, and in the race, I have the brake balance at +1 or 1 to the rear for extra rotation on the Dodge Viper. And let's go ahead and get this started by bringing yourself towards the left side of the track. Bring yourself all the way to the left and brake before you reach the 100-meter board. Brake hard for a short while. Ease off of the brakes as you turn in, turning in after you pass the 50-meter board, and make sure you go over or around this yellow curb. And make sure your right wheels do not hit this yellow curb, and gently accelerate your way out. And in my opinion, the first and the third turn, which is the hairpin that is coming up, are the most important turns, since that is where a lot of the time can be found. And your next braking point before the 100-meter board, brake on the tarmac, brake hard for a short while, slowly ease off of the brakes as you turn in, and as you hit the apex, feather in the throttle so you don't get any wheel spin and you can get a fast, clean exit. And eventually you want to bring yourself towards the left side of the track, and once again, just like for turn 3, brake before the 100-meter board. Except this time you're braking just a tad bit earlier and still brake on the tarmac. Brake hard for a short while, gently ease off of the brakes as you turn in, gradually accelerate so you don't have a risk of losing control. Then bring yourself towards the right and brake before the 50-meter board. Brake hard for a short moment, ease off of the brakes as you turn in, and take advantage of the curbs to help the car rotate around this turn. And then brake just as you get onto the track piece that is on the right. Use a little bit of braking for this turn, take advantage of the curbs just like the last turn, and you want to get on the throttle as soon as you can, once again taking advantage of the red and white curbs. Then bring yourself towards the left, look for the track marshals that are also on the left, and brake just before you pass them. So brake right around here, brake hard for a short moment, nice and easy off the brakes, gently getting on the throttle, and finally brake before you reach the end of the red and white area that is on the left. Quick burst of braking, just try to stay on the red and white curves and you are good to go. But that's all for the lap guide. Let's go ahead and take a look at the strategies. Alright, so we're on the qualifying section of the guide now. 5-minute qualifying session, which means that if you decide to do one long qualifying stint, you will have 3 chances to try to get the best qualifying time possible. The tire wear is a ×4, and at a track that doesn't have too many turns, tire wear isn't that much of an issue for the qualifying session. So the moment you gain control of your car, you can pretty much just go flat out. Exception qualifying is going to be useful because you have 3 pretty long straights. The first one being at the main straight, obviously, where the start finish line is. The second one just after turn 1. And then the third straight just after turn 3, or the hairpin that is after turn 1. So as long as you position yourself just right within the 3/4 of a second gap between yourself and the next car, you'll be in interception range, your car will accelerate a bit faster, and you'll be able to reach higher speeds. But because of the higher speeds, you will want to brake just a little bit earlier to make up for that longer braking distance. And just make sure you position yourself just right so you don't run the risk of getting too close to the car in front of you if you do choose to take part in exception qualifying, because if you get too close to the car in front, you have to slow yourself down a bit to make sure that you don't punt the car ahead of you, which means that you will end up losing a bit of time. And this will be especially the case with turn 1, because the track itself is pretty bumpy at turn 1, and then you have the curves, the yellow curves, that can easily throw the car off. So let's say you're in a exception qualifying and the car in front, they mess up the first turn and they lose 2/10. Well, now you're going to be a lot closer to them, especially with the exception eventually kicking in. So you'll be really close to the car in front because they messed up their first turn, and then the substream makes you even closer to them. So now you have to run the risk of slowing yourself down so you don't get into an incident with them, which means that the slipstream qualifying will backfire. So slipstream qualifying, it's a double-edged sword. You can greatly benefit from it, but at the same time, it can backfire if things don't go right. So if you're in a lower level lobby, you're going to be better off qualifying by yourself, minimize the risk of interruptions. But in a higher level lobby, slipstream qualifying is going to be more common. And you also want to be pretty confident on how you take these turns, because it can be really easy to lose a lot of time if you're not confident through this track. So in this run, I ended up getting a 128.0, which is not good for someone in my skill level. So I decided to, later on in the day, go for another qualifying run. So this is just me by myself, just trying to see what kind of lap times I can get. And this time I was able to get a much better 127.3. So from the looks of it, your qualifying time shouldn't be too far from your time trial time. So in this case, I got a 127.3 for the qualifying session, whereas in the time trial, I ended up having a 127.0. And at the end of the day, you'll have 3 chances to try to get the best qualifying time possible. Just try to be really confident through these turns, as confidence and making sure you nail down turns 1 and 3 will lead you to getting good lap times. But let's say qualifying session is now over. The first thing you want to do is go to driving options, change the front tires first to racing medium or hard tires, and then do the same thing with the rear tires. So in my case, I switched over to the racing medium tires. And I say that because this is pretty much a one-stop race where you only use the racing medium and hard tires. But let's go on over to the general information first. So we are doing 19 laps at Rebel Ring with the Group 3 cars. Fuel is a ×3, so fuel is an issue. And the tire wear is a ×4, which means that tire wear isn't too much of an issue for a lot of cars. So here is the strategy chart. And as you see, this is pretty much a one-stop race where you use the required tires. So all 3 tire compounds, so soft, medium, and hard tires, are available for this race, but only the racing medium and hard tires are required. So you have to use the racing medium and hard tires for at least 1 lap, so you don't get a 1-minute penalty after the race ends. Also, as you start your race, your tires are going to be very cold. So you want to be careful throughout your first lap, brake a little bit earlier, be a bit more gentle as you exit the turns as your tires eventually start to warm up. Also, the tires that you want to start on, it'll depend on where you qualify. So if you qualify towards the front, start on the racing medium tires. But if you're qualifying in the middle or the back, start on the racing hard tires, get the slower tire compound out of the way. After all, you're not going to be using them for that long, depending on the car that you're in. And then you do the rest of the race on the racing medium tires. Now, tire wear isn't going to be too much of an issue depending on the car that you're in, because at a track like Rebel Ring, there isn't too many turns, and the tire wear is a ×4, which means that your tires will be able to last a while. For reference, in the Dodge Viper, I was able to get about 11 laps out of the racing soft tires, 16 laps on the racing medium tires, and obviously for the racing hard tires, you can go the entire distance, so all 19 laps on the racing hard tires. But obviously, because the racing hard tires are the slowest tire compound, you don't want to be on them for too long. So for example, in my test runs, I've been going around 15 to 16 laps on the racing medium tires, which means that I have to do the last 3 to 4 laps on the racing hard tires. But there are other cars that may not be able to last as long on the racing medium tires, so they may be pitting closer to the halfway point of the race, which is around laps 9 to 11. Or there may be cars that are even better on the tires to the point where they can pretty much do 18 laps on the racing medium tires and only 1 lap on the racing hard tires. And because the tire wear isn't too much of an issue, someone may ask, well, why don't you go for a 2-stop where you use the racing soft tires for half of the race, then do the racing medium tires for the other half of the race, which means that you only do 1 lap on the racing hard tires. Well, let's find out why by going into the pit stop, because we need to find out the pit loss, in which the pit loss is going to be a bit long. Assuming that you're only going in for a tire change, you're going to lose around 21 to 22 seconds. So it's going to be pretty long. And if you have to do a 2-stop, well, you're losing another 21 to 22 seconds. And it's going to be difficult, if not impossible, to make up the extra pit loss time, which is unfortunately going to make the 2-stop not viable at all. So the racing soft stint is pretty much useless. And this is also assuming that you do not refuel, because fuel is an issue. You may end up having to refuel. So let's go ahead and actually take a look at each of these strategies, because we need to find out how fast the 1-stop is versus the 2-stop. And we also need to find out whether it is faster to fuel save to not have to refuel, or to just go flat out and take the hit refueling at some point. So let's go ahead and start by showing the 2-stop. So this is where I go 11 laps on the racing soft tires, 1 lap on the racing hard tires, take the refuel, and then do 7 laps on the racing medium tires. And obviously, by being on the softer tire compound, you're going to be able to carry a lot more speed through the corners, which means that you'll be getting the fastest lap times. But because you are on the softer tire compound, the racing soft tires, they're not going to last as long. So in my case, I was able to get about 11 laps out of the racing soft tires. And also, we are going flat out because with the 2-stop, I want to be going as fast as possible, which means that I will have to take a hit when I refuel. Now, I am doing a bit of a variation. So instead of going soft, medium, hard, I am going soft, hard, medium. And this is because I want to save the refueling when I start my second long stint, which is going to be the medium stint. So 11 laps later, we're pinning on in. I'm switching over to the racing hard tires, but I'm not going to refuel just yet. And once again, the pit loss is pretty long here. It's around 21 to 22 seconds, and that is if you only go in for a tire change. So switching over to the racing hard tires, and we're going to go ahead and wait a while until we gain control of the car, which is after the wall on the left ends. We gain control of the car, and we're going to go as fast as possible. And because we still have the racing medium tires left, and because the racing tires last quite a while, we can easily just go 1 lap on the racing hard tires. So let's skip on over to the next pit stop. And this time we'll be switching over to the racing medium tires and refueling. So this will fulfill our last tire requirement of the racing medium tires. And yes, I do have to refuel, so my pit loss is going to be longer than 21 to 22 seconds. So if you see that little diamond, that is where the fuel needs to be to finish the race. And I pretty much need to refuel to that point because I didn't do any fuel saving. I was going flat out. And I'm going to lose an additional about 3 to 4 seconds for the refueling, because the refueling rate is at 7 liters per second. And I'm just going to keep going flat out because I didn't do any fuel saving, and I have just enough fuel to be able to finish the race. And at the end of the race, so at the end of lap 19, I'm going to end up finishing with a 28 minutes and 54 seconds, ignoring the penalty that I got from going off track. So 28 minutes and 54 seconds with the fastest lap time of a 1:27.9. So this is going to be the bar that is going to be set, because right now we're going to go on over to the 1-stop, and for this one we're going to also go flat out. So let's go ahead and start this run. So in this run, I'm only going to do a 1-stop where I use the required tires, so the racing medium and hard tires only. So in this run, no soft stint will be used. I will be doing 15 laps on the racing medium tires, which means that I'll be doing the last 4 laps on the racing hard tires. I am not going to be fuel saving, which means that I will have to refuel. And let's skip on over towards the end of lap 9 just to check on how the tires are doing. So there is a bit of tire wear that is going on the racing medium tires, but the car is still driving just fine. And when the tire wear starts to kick in, it's going to vary between the different cars. So for some, the tire wear may kick in as early as lap 9, whereas other cars, the tire wear may start to kick in as late as, say, lap 12. In my case, I think the tire wear slowly started to kick in at around laps 11 to 12. That's when the car started to feel a bit more understeery and the braking wasn't as good as earlier in the run. So you want to adjust your driving to make sure that you don't end up making any mistakes, because as the tires wear out, it can be pretty easy to make errors. So for example, the hairpins, with worn tires, it'll be easier to end up overshooting the braking points. So you may want to brake just a tad bit earlier so you don't end up overshooting those braking points. So let's skip on over towards the end of lap 15 as I'm getting disconnected, but luckily this is in single player mode, so I don't have to worry about disconnects. So end of lap 15, I'm going over to the pit stop and switch on over to the racing hard tires, and I do have to refuel because I did go all out and I did not do any sort of fuel saving. So we do have to wait a while as we are losing 21 to 22 seconds through the pit loss, and that's just for tire change. We will be losing a couple more seconds because we do have to refuel. So the tires are in and we're going to end up refueling about 21%, so we lost about 3 to 4 seconds. So our pit loss is going to be closer to the 25-second range. And because we're only using the required tires, we're only doing a one stop, which means that we're pretty much good to go. We keep on racing until we reach the finish line. And skip on over towards the very end of the race, barely any tire wear on the racing hard tires, and we're going to finish with a 28 minutes and 44 seconds. So going flat out and only doing a one stop is 10 seconds faster than the two stop. So the two stop is not going to be viable at all. You want to go for a one stop where you only use the racing medium and hard tires. Now the next question is it faster to go all out and refuel, or to fuel save and try not to refuel? So for this one, I'm still doing 15 laps on the racing medium tires and only 4 laps on the racing hard tires, but the main change I'm doing is that I'm going to be fuel saving by short shifting. Now this is where it gets a little tricky because how much you need to fuel save is going to depend on the car that you're in. So if you're in a car like the Dodge Viper, you're going to need to do quite a bit of short shifting, whereas if you're in another car like the Porsche 911 RSR, you won't need to short shift as much to be able to make all 19 laps without refueling. But the main thing here is that by short shifting, yes, you are fuel saving, but you're also losing pace. So you're going to be a couple tenths of a second slower than your normal pace where you don't fuel save. So that is something that you really need to be aware of. And this also depends on the car that you're in. So some cars may be able to fuel save better and not lose that much pace, whereas other cars, if they try to fuel save, they risk losing a lot of pace because their fuel saving efficiency is not that good. So for example, in my all-out run for the one stop where I didn't do any sort of fuel saving, my best lap time was a 128.6, whereas with this one, the fuel saving run, my best lap was a 129.0. So I'm losing around 0.4 of a second per lap. And this is also considering that I don't have anyone in front of me. And this is where the slipstream will be incredibly useful in the race, because with the slipstream, as long as you're within 3/4 of a second between yourself and the next car, your car will be able to go a bit faster. The slipstream lets you save a bit more fuel, and if you take that along with the short shifting, you'll be able to save even more fuel while being able to keep up with the pace of the car ahead of you. But for now, let's just focus on racing by ourselves, just trying out the fuel saving strategy. And in this case, I don't need to refuel at all. And for this race, if you do decide to fuel save, you need to use around 5.2% of fuel per lap. And yeah, this is going to be a bit confusing because it's not an exact number that you need to save. It's not. So in my case, I was just thinking, okay, let's just use 5% of fuel per lap because I'm not a mathematician. So each lap I was just checking to make sure I had at least 5% of fuel used, and I should be pretty much good to go. And I think at some point I did notice that I was starting to gather up a bit of extra fuel, which means that I was able to push a bit more. But for the most part, I was just thinking about using 5% of fuel, just make it a bit easier on myself. And let's skip on over towards the very end of the race. So I did push a bit more because I had a bit of extra fuel to play with. And in this run, I'm also going to get a 28 minutes and 44 seconds with my best lap time being a 128.9. So this is a bit interesting because going flat out and doing the fuel saving run gave me the same total time. So this is where it gets a little weird because we know that the one stop where you only use the racing medium and hard tires is the way to go for the race. So you only use the racing soft tires for qualifying. But in terms of either trying to go flat out for the race or fuel saving the entire race, it's going to depend on the situation that you're in. So let's say that you qualify pole position and those behind you, so second place and third place, let's say they start to fight it out very early on and you break the slipstream from them. So at that point, you can decide to just say screw it, go flat out, and just try to build that gap from them so you don't run the risk of getting swallowed up in their battles. Or if you qualify in the middle of the pack or in the back of the pack, then you decide, you know what, let's just fuel save, just make sure that we have enough fuel to be able to finish the race. So you stay in the slipstream and you do the short shifting to save fuel. And if the cars in front didn't save fuel and they have to refuel but you don't, then there's a possibility that you can jump a couple positions just by skipping the refueling because you saved enough fuel to the point where you don't have to do any sort of refueling. But it'll depend on the situation that you're placed in, but I think that this race will end up being just another fuel saver or a bit of a fuel saver depending on the car that you're in. Because let's say you qualify pole position, you go flat out, but the cars behind you, they save fuel by being in your slipstream and short shifting. So when it comes time to pit, they'll jump the position on you because they fuel saved. They don't have to refuel, but you have to. So you'll be dropping a couple positions. So again, it'll depend on the situation that you're in, but I think it'll just end up being another fuel saving race. So get ready to do a bit or a lot of short shifting depending on the car that you're in. But most importantly, stay in the slipstream because you can get a free tow while being able to fuel save even more. So at the end of the day, this is a one-stop race where you use the racing medium and hard tires only, use the racing soft tires for qualifying, and just get ready to do a bit or a lot of fuel saving depending on the car that you're in. And get ready to stay under the slipstream to take even more advantage of the fuel saving. But anyways, let's go ahead and take a look at places to overtake and the penalty serving zone. So I would advise to wait on this part because after the first turn there is a longer back straight which can lead to a better overtaking opportunity, especially if the car in front got a really bad exit out of the first turn. So the car in front got a bad exit out of turn 1 and you got a good exit. You can take advantage of the slipstream and try to go for a pass leading up to turn 3, which is this hairpin right here. Here also comes the first penalty serving zone, which is where you arguably lose the most time if you have to serve a penalty, which also leads to another overtake opportunity leading up to turn 4, which is this hairpin right here. After that, overtaking is going to be a lot more situational. So the car in front of you is on the worst tire compound and you're on the better one. You can try to go for overtake through these next couple of turns, but for the most part, it's going to be a single file line. And we go through turn 7 and then turn 8. And as we approach turn 9, here comes the last place to serve the penalty. And this is also another place where it is possible to get some overtakes done. Just be aware that cars may be slowing down a lot to try to enter the pit stop, so just be aware of that. But anyways, that is pretty much it for this guide. Once again, one stop race. Get ready to do a bit of fuel saving, especially under the slipstream. Use the racing soft tires for qualifying only, and the racing medium and hard tires for the race. But that's all for me. This is MCA. Wish you a good race, and I'll see you in the next video.